Thanks for joining us for another episode.
Treasure rejection.
It is wonderful and it is hard.
It's an extremely hard gig that we signed up for to want someone else's children.
Write what they want to write and not what they should write.
Oh, instant motherhood.
Listen up.
This is the Rose Quinn Podcast. Hey guys, I hope you're ready for another amazing episode of the podcast. Today we have Emily R. King, the always wonderful, amazing author who's one of my favorites on the podcast. She's actually been on an episode before, so if you want to catch up, you can go back, listen to that, and then come on back. She has a new book coming out. It's actually already out. It is the first in the Evermore Chronicles, and it is called Before the Broken Star. I'm so excited for it, and everything she writes is amazing. I first found her through her first series, The 100th Queen, which is 4 books, and so amazing. She's just a master at world building and creating these characters who you just attach to so deeply and want to see what happens to them, and then you watch them grow and learn all these things. It's very, very amazing. As always, I want to tell you about my favorite book right now. It's one I've posted about and was really lucky to be a part of the book blog tour for, but it is The Royal Secret by Lucinda Riley. And if you have always dreamed of being a princess, or you just love mystery, you wanted to be a journalist, there's so many different things that could draw you into this book that would make you love it. It's got quite a few different point of views, which I always love, because this story you really just need to see it from all the angles. But this book actually was published back in 2000 originally, and there was some scandal around it just because it regards the royal family in the UK, and it was actually pulled from a lot of bookstores. They wouldn't sell it because they were thought it was too scandalous and too damning, even though it's complete fiction. So it is being republished, and was just republished, which I think is really cool, kind of giving it a second life. But Lucinda Riley is quite an amazing author, and she sold tons of books and is really, really good at what she does. So let me read you the blurb. The Royal Secret. When Sir James Harrison, one of the greatest actors of his generation, passes away at the age of 95, he leaves behind not just a heartbroken family, but also a secret so shocking it could rock the English establishment to its core. Joanna, an up-and-coming reporter, is assigned to cover the legendary actor's funeral, attended by glitzy celebrities of every background. But Joanna stumbles on something dark beneath the glamour, the mention of a letter James Harrison has left behind, the contents of which many have been desperate to keep concealed for over 70 years. As she peels back the veil of lies that have shrouded the secret, she realizes that she's close to uncovering something deadly serious, and the royal family may be implicated. Before long, someone is on her tracks, attempting to prevent her from discovering the truth, and they'll stop at nothing to reach the letter before she does. It's an amazing book. I couldn't put it down. I read it in a day and a half, which is a little bit longer than it normally takes me to read books. But if you love mystery, if you love a little bit of romance, if you love the royal family, I definitely recommend it. It's one to add to your list. Especially, I think it's so cool just considering how much scandal was around it at the beginning. Now, I don't have any real writing topic to talk about right now. I'm kind of in the middle of just this heavy book review schedule, which I love. If you look at my Instagram feed, it's pretty much all books right now, which is super cool. And I'm in the process of line edits of one of my books, so I promise next time I'll have some more writing topics for you. But let's get to Emily, because this interview is amazing. She's always so full of wisdom, and since this is her second time on the podcast, as you probably noticed, I usually ask people the same questions. I like to get the same information just from authors so we can see the different journeys that people take to query, to get an agent to get published. I think it's cool to see that it's really different for everybody, which hopefully will make you feel better, because if your journey looks a little bit different than, your friends or somebody you see on social media, that's okay. It's all different for everybody. But Emily is wonderful. So she's going to talk to us a little bit more about her second series, and we talk about writing for you and writing what you love and all of that. So she's pretty wonderful. But her book that just came out is Before the Broken Star, and you need to go buy it right now. I've read, I'm in the middle of reading it, and it's amazing, like everything she writes. But here is the blurb. Everly Donovan is living on borrowed time. The lone survivor of her family's unexplained assassination, she was saved by an ingeniously crafted clockwork heart. But the time she was given won't last forever. Now, every TikTok reminds her how fragile her existence is and hastens her quest to expose Killian Markham, the Navy admiral who shattered her world and left her for dead. But Everly's hunt for justice will be a long and hard-won voyage. Her journey takes her to a penal colony on a cursed isle, where she will be married off and charged to build the new world. It is here, and beyond, that hidden realms hide, treasures are unearthed, her family's secrets are buried, and young love will test the strength of her makeshift heart. When Everly discovers Markham may not be who he seems, her pursuit for truth is bound to his redemption, her tragic history, and her astonishing destiny. Ooh, didn't you just get chills? It's so amazing. Well, before we listen to the interview, go and add Before the Broken Star to your Amazon cart. Do it right now. And get ready to get to know Emily R. King a little bit more. Well, I'm so excited that we get to chat again. I'm so excited for your new book series coming out. I cannot wait.
Thank you.
It's going to be amazing. But tell us a little bit more about that. The Evermore Chronicles, your girl with a clock heart.
Right. So it's about Everly Donovan, and when she was 7 years old, her family was killed by what had been a family friend, and she was stabbed through the chest. And her uncle, who is a clockmaker, saved her with this ingenious clock heart. And Everly doesn't know how much time she has or how long it'll take for her, so she spends about 10 years growing up, and then trains with a sword, which is the only thing that is recovered in the rubble, because the guy burned down the house after he killed her family, and she wants to seek him out. He is a governor for her of a penal colony, and so she ends up getting to the penal colony and trying to hunt him down, and then she finds out that he's not at all what she thought he was, and that some of the things she remembers as a child, because we misremember things, right, weren't what she thought, and she doesn't know who was responsible, if it was her father or if he was, and all these secrets come about. In the meantime, there's the magic system revolves around time. I have one of the deities is Father Time himself, and he was a lot of fun to write because he's a bit of a mysterious character. You don't see a lot about him in fiction, so it was fun to kind of play around with that. The mythology, because you know I love mythology, is actually built based off of Celtic mythology and how they believe that their world was created. And it's absolutely fascinating who they believe the creator is and how the world itself was created. They believe that the first thing created was a tree. Wow. So I really played off a lot of that. It's got a bunch of very stereotypical type fairy tale type tropes in it, but I turn a lot of them on their head. So It was like writing the type of book that after watching and reading all these fairy tales for years that I always kind of wanted to do, to play around with it. And it's not a retelling, it's just a mishmash of all of these ideas that we draw out of fairy tales. And at the heart of it is this girl who believes she's broken. She's very damaged. Her clock heart reminds her every day with every tick and every talk of what happened to her family, and that this man walked free and no one knows what he did. He thinks she's dead, so it gives her an opportunity to find out more and to go after him. And that's the heart of the tale, is this girl figuring out that no matter what happens to you, you aren't broken, like someone can't break you. But we get these ideas in our head about who we are, and it's very difficult to change some of these perceptions, especially about ourselves. And she's a little bit more strong-willed, but that's also, there's two sides to everything. The strong-willed helps her track this guy down, but it also makes her maybe less likely to listen, a little bit more rigid.
Right, she's a little more stubborn.
Yeah, right. And so she's very, a little gruff. Emotions affect her heart, her clock heart, so she's very careful about who she lets in. She's very standoffish in her world. If she's caught with a clock heart, she will be blamed that she's a sorceress and burned at the stake.
Oh, boy.
So she has a life-threatening thing as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was a really fun world to do. I'm finishing up right now book 3, so I have it completely ended, and my edits are due next week. And I love how it all ends and how her whole arc comes together, and being able to create a villain that was very dimensional, not at all what you think he is, was also a task and a challenge. But I think Rita will like it. It's very different than The 100 Queens in that it is more of a traditional fantasy, dark fantasy, which, I think readers will be up for. We'll see.
I think so. I think dark fantasy is very popular and wanted right now. I feel like there's a lot of dark fantasies out there.
I can't get enough of it. I love that kind of stuff. And I love really complex characters. I really wanted to write like a female Batman. Like that's really what I wanted at the heart of it. And I think we're a little bit less forgiving of women in those roles than we are of men. And so I kind of wanted to challenge that, too. I wanted to write a woman, and I wanted her to be accepted for the same reasons we accept Batman. And, it's interesting to see people's responses to that, because we have so many built-in, biases that are ingrained in us about what we think women are and aren't. And, it's good to test those boundaries and to open minds, and to open my mind, too.
For sure.
Sometimes I'll be writing a character and I think, is this a boy or is this a girl? I'm like, it can be a girl. I don't have enough girls. Like, it's okay that it's a girl. Just things like that we don't really recognize in ourselves until we really think about it. So
I love what you said about your villain being very multidimensional. I think that's something that, like you said, is very difficult to achieve, but makes it sometimes the best villain. Like, I feel like the best villains are the ones that you kind of end up rooting for a little bit. Like you're behind them, you want something good to happen to them, or want to see more of their stories. So I think that I'm excited to read it and to see what it all is all about.
It's a little crazy. I'm not gonna lie. This book has got some crazy fairy tale stuff. I mean, if you read the Grimm's brothers, they're
crazy.
They're all over the place.
Yes.
And so I wanted there to be an unpredictableness in it, and just kind of out there, but it works because it feels familiar, even though it's strange and kind of quacky. It does work. So it was fun. It was super fun to do. I don't know. It was something that I had an idea about a few years ago, and I had a friend who went through a horrible trauma. And there was no justice for what happened to her, and it just relit that fire, and I went back to it and continue to go back to it. And so I kind of credit her for making me stick to it and finish the book.
That's awesome. This leads into my next thing perfectly, but you say you're finishing book 3 right now, your edits, and so book 1 comes out in June, and book 2 comes out in August? Mm-hmm. So tell me about this writing schedule that you have, because that seems a little crazy. I mean,
it is. It is.
Yeah.
I write as much as I can when I can, and with this series, we picked titles, and I had an idea of that I knew it would be 3 books, and I knew how I wanted it to end at the very beginning. And so that made it a little bit easier. And I had this idea in 2013.
Okay.
So, it had been ruminating since then. And I wrote the manuscript when I was on submission for the 100th Queen. And then I sold the 100th Queen and continued to sell books in that series. So this is not on the back burner. So as much as I didn't have a ton of time to write it, I had been, percolating on it for years. And I think that made all the difference when it came to actually putting words down to the paper and getting to the end that I had conceived a long time before of what I wanted their happy ending to look like. So I just wrote to that, and I write generally very quickly. I set very fast deadlines, and with the Amazon publishing model, it lends well towards for series to publish them close together.
Yeah.
Which I like as well. I like my readers not having to wait too long. I like to propel a lot of book 2 and 3 behind book 1 so people can finish the series. Because quite often, when book 3 is a year to 2, 4, 6 years,
right.
after book 1, it's hard to keep up that momentum.
It is.
It just is. The readers go off and do other things. They forget about it. They don't finish the series. It happens. Life happens.
Yep.
The sooner that those books are published together, I think the more likely it is that people will get to see my complete story and read right to the end.
I think that's awesome. I know there's another author who I follow and love his books. He also is published through Amazon Publishing, and his books come out really quickly, and like you just said, it helps me. I read them actually instead of forgetting about them. There's so many series I have that I've read before, and I'm just waiting for the next one to come out, but it'll be a while till I see it on Amazon and remember it and actually go in and buy it. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
How do you, with your accelerated writing schedule, and it's, nice that you had all that time to kind of formulate and get to know characters, but how do you keep yourself on a schedule? I know you said you just write when you can. Is that really what it is? Like you just bring your laptop with you and write wherever you are?
I am always writing, and it's probably not the healthiest. I know it's not the healthiest balance.
Probably.
And I kind of back off of that a bit. But a lot of what I'm doing is always about writing. I think we, as writers, we are storytellers, but we also consume a ton of stories. So I am constantly looking for fodder and inspiration everywhere, either in books or in movies or in TV or in music or in history. Songs have stories, everything. Paintings.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, consuming that keeps me motivated. It keeps me energized, and it helps me create because I'm always consuming other people's stories or, history, real stories that are around me. Just life is full of it.
For sure.
And I try to have lots of experiences too. Like I went and got certified scuba diving so I could write the Marrows in my book 2 in the series. They're the Celtic version of mermaids, but they call them Marrows.
Oh.
And I wanted to know what it was like to be under the sea and what it was like to swim around and be with the fish and what it looked like and what it sounded like. And so I wanted to be certified anyway, but that really propelled me to go and do it. So a lot of these things, they encourage me to get it done, and then it keeps my verve high. It keeps me excited to go and finish my writing. That, and I have really fast deadlines, so and I don't like being late. So the anxiety of meeting my deadline also propels me. But I think that the way that I have avoided burnout is that I just soak in every story I can, everything that creative that I can, to keep me going.
I think that's so awesome. I've definitely gone through a couple spurts in my writing life where it was like I would go to work, I would write on my lunch, I would come home and I would write, and then I would go to bed and do it all again. And you can get so burnt out on that and like just emotionally exhausted to the point where everyone was like, I don't want to be around you because you're kind of like a writing zombie. I think to keep yourself sane and all that, you do still need to live your life. Go out. I love to take breaks by, reading a different book, something completely different than what I'm writing. It helps to just have that mental break,
Right. It really does. And it helps you just feel like you're part of something bigger. You're just one voice that's creating something, and everyone else is, and it's wonderful to be even just a little bit of part of that and have some sort of, voice out there as well.
Yeah.
It's encouraging to have to contribute, because I feel like I'm taking all the time from other people's inspiration and their creativity. I'm benefiting off of it. This is how I feel, and it motivating me. And it's nice to put something out there as like a thank you for what I took from them.
Yes, because I will attest that your books are motivating as somebody who, writes and wants to be published and all of that. I remember when I found that I had the 100th Queen series, and I was like, what? This is amazing. I need to go write, and so I can do the same thing and make somebody feel, the same way that this author, you, is making me feel right now.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's part of it, right? We just want to be able to have a voice out there and hopefully reach a reader, and it's so fun to be able to have that. It always awes me. I'm like, dude, somebody not only found the book, but then picked it up and then either bought it or checked it out of the library and then spent time reading it. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot.
Right?
It's a lot to ask of anybody. It's pretty awesome. That amazement, I don't think it'll ever go away, because I know how precious our time is. I know how precious our money is, and it's pretty cool.
And there's so many different ways people can spend their time nowadays with Netflix and all of that, visual stimulation so close, to have somebody take the time to still read books, which, is, I feel like something really special.
Yeah, it is.
Well, so in talking about, keeping your creativity up and, keeping yourself motivated, I know you've posted a couple times about your Me project, which you don't need to tell us about. Keep it for you if you want to. But I think that, I think this is something I've talked to other people about. It's so important for us to still keep the passion and the love of this creative writing thing we do up. So, how I love that how you said earlier about the Evermore Chronicles, how it's just kind of what you wanted to see as far as all these fairy tales. How important do you think it is, to your style, to an author, to just be themselves and write authentically, to just write what you want to write and what you would want to read, as opposed to, what you think might sell out or be the, most popular?
Yeah, I tend to write commercial stories, and I tend to pick ideas that are commercial. That's just how my brain works. I love reading quiet books. I really enjoy the slower character development and books with no action scenes. I don't write those. I write the opposite.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy that, and I feel like for me, finding something that I get to keep just to myself for a little while without it being something that I have to give to my agent or that my editor's expecting it, the longer I can keep it just that it's just mine, is a new project. So even if it ends up being something I sell, which ideally it will be, if I put those hours into something, it would be great, especially because, like I said, most of my ideas that I really put a lot of effort into are commercial, so that is a possibility.
Yeah.
I still just want that time where it's mine, and I get to be alone with it, and I get to just dream really big and ridiculous ideas and try stupid things that I know I'll probably have to take out, but that really make me happy. Stuff like that. I think that it's really important to remember to write for you.
Yeah.
There is a temptation to try and write to please people, and that's impossible to do. There's a book for everybody but not everyone's going to like that book. And we've seen it time and time again. There are people who are like, they wear it as a badge of honor that they never read Harry Potter, or they don't like Game of Thrones, or, we have this culture where if people really like something, we have to have the anti-culture of people who don't. And I think just that alone shows us that, writing to have everyone love you or adore you, it's just not a possibility. You, at the end of the day, have to keep your integrity and do what you want to do. And when I keep something just to myself, I know the integrity is there, because I haven't written it for anyone else. I haven't gotten any feedback. It's just something I enjoy. So, those new projects there's no pressure.
Yeah.
It's just fun, and you're still dreaming, and it's a safe place to be.
I love that.
It's safe.
Yeah.
And I like that a lot.
Yeah.
And you never know what's going to happen, right? I mean, until you sit down and you start putting things on the page, you may hate it. You're going to be like, that was a terrible idea. But the best thing is nobody knows. You haven't sold it. You don't now have to write this book you hate, you know? It's like,
right.
Okay, scrap it and try something else. So,
yeah,
keeping that integrity and writing for you, like, put the reader in mind, too. That's there. But that can come after.
Yeah.
So keeping it a me project for as long as possible, there's nothing wrong with that.
I love that. I think that's so important. I think even I've struggled with that where, what I'm writing, I'm like, oh, is this something that will sell? Is this something that an agent, is going to sign me for or whatever? And that sort of takes the fun away from it and adds just like layers and layers of anxiety. So I've tried to be better about, scaling back those thoughts and really just writing for me and what I think is best. And then if nobody likes it, hey, nobody likes it. But, at least I can... It's still cool to just be like, oh yeah, I've written 2 books, and no, they are not published, but at least I've written 2 books, like, at least I finished that.
That's right, and that's a huge accomplishment, and being able to hang on to that as long as possible is really good, because publishing, the industry itself is very different than the creative, and I think the authors that do really, really well can marry the two. They're also super business savvy, and they understand that they're creating a product, and they know how to market that product, and they don't let the influence of creating get in the way. And I know that part is coming, but I like to avoid that kind of as long as possible and just, nurture my baby. And see what happens. Be alone with it. Just for a little while. Just like after I had my kids, my favorite part after giving birth was being alone with them that first night and just having them to myself and figuring out their little facial expressions and their noises and their little things, and just it was like my reward for 9 months of hell, like holding this sweet little baby and getting to know them as like a real person. And then we got out of the hospital and we went on with life, but that's those first just time you have with that idea and you're nurturing these things, that's when you really learn what's in your book and what's in you, and what you have in front of you. And if it's, what you're going to do with it. It's a precious time. And I haven't had as much time to dwell on some of these things because I've sold these books before.
Right.
So the longer I can have, the better.
Yes, the longer you can nurture your little me project, the better, for sure.
That's right.
I love it. So in talking about... I want to go back to the 100th Queen for a minute. How did it feel? And I guess you're sort of at the same stage with Evermore. You're finished. You finished book 3. How does it feel, to put an end to the series and to just let those characters go? I mean, I'm sure you are happy with the way things wrapped up and all of that. But was it kind of weird to go from the 100th Queen to writing these new characters, or was it exciting to get, to write in new voices?
I think it was both. It was weird in that I don't know that I was completely done with them. It was the end of my first series, and I think we always remember like our first anything.
Yeah.
And so it felt so bittersweet. Like, oh my gosh, I actually did this, and then like I'm done writing you. I'm kind of sad.
Right.
You have like a whole life ahead of you, and I'm not going to see any of it. But I do feel like it. As far as the ending was what I wanted for them, it sets things up enough where I felt like, okay, I don't need to know. Like, I know that they'll be fine.
Yeah.
So I was able to let go of that. And then moving on to the book, I think it was a little unique just because I had already written Everly.
That's true.
I wrote Everly right after Clinda. So I went back to Everly, and that voice was still there, if not stronger. And it was, I'm glad that I had that to go to, because I think I probably would have mourned the end of the 100 Queen series a little bit more had I not had another character's voice right there. So it is bittersweet. I miss it. There's a couple things I really miss about that world, but I'm also just, in general, just really surprised that I finished it. So I'm satisfied with how it ended. I'm satisfied with how it all came together. I feel like it was the best that I could do, and I want to always get better with my writing. But as far as like that story, I feel like I did I put everything I could into it. And what else can you do?
Right.
You know, like, that's it. You just give your all, and then you learn, and then you move on and give your all on the next one, and hopefully it's better.
Right.
And so that's how I feel about it. I want to always be getting better. I want to always be pushing myself and trying new things and learning and growing. I don't ever want to be stagnant.
No.
And so as much as that was an amazing opportunity, I'm like, okay, I did that. Let's see what else you're made of. Let's see what else you can do.
For sure. And I think it's cool to, you know, you still have, from what you've told me about the Evermore Chronicles, it's still, you know, you kind of get to work with mythology and all of these things, but it's different, so it's new territory for you to grow and write in a different way, which is definitely always a growing experience.
Right. And in Evermore Chronicles, I just write Everly's perspective.
Oh.
You know, all 3 books, it's just hers. And there was enough of her growth in there that it just needed to be hers.
That's
you know?
awesome.
And I think Collie made very, very definite, prominent strides in her growth, and fairly quickly. And Everly is a little bit, she's more damaged, you know? She's got a whole lot of baggage. And I think it's realistic that it would take longer for her to get to that healing place.
Yeah.
And so it was nurturing a character who is a little bit more darker, you know, and purposefully stubborn and determined and fierce, not thrust into things against her will, but like seeking it out. It's a different journey. It's a very it's a bit more intimate that way.
Yeah.
And you know, so it was just a different thing to do. But yeah, I completely different that way. No other perspectives. And
wow.
It did make it a little bit easier to write, but in some ways harder. So,
right.
Like I said, you just learn something every time, you know?
I think just something I thought of, you know, I love that Everly is more of a, what it makes me think of is just, you know, she's a little bit more broken, but I think we all, especially, you know, like my parents got divorced when I was really young, and I feel like I had a lot of things that happened in my young childhood that kind of, I feel like, shaped me or my views of the world. And I think a lot of people out there can relate to that in a lot of different ways. And so I think and I feel like we need to see more of those kinds of characters, especially in books that, you know, teenagers and angsty, stubborn kids probably like Everly need to read and be like, oh, this is somebody who's just like me or who has these same feelings, even if it's in, you know, a completely different world. I think that's just so awesome. And I think just more of what we need to see out there.
I think so too, especially with youth. I know that's the kind of stories that I looked for as a kid, because I was a disaster as a teenager. I mean, I really was. And I was the product of a lot of things that had happened to me, but also I was starting to make choices that really weren't the best as well.
Right.
And I tried to learn from them as quickly as possible, but sometimes you burn yourself and it takes a while, you know, for that to heal, and it can leave a scar. And I think for me, Everly is just very much of what I think a normal girl would be. You know, I can't imagine someone who had been through that kind of trauma being any other way. She'd either be terrified or she'd become this fierce, you know, girl who would go out and try and find answers. And, you know, that's realistic to me. I feel like that's what it would become. But no, there are a lot of people who go through really tough things, and it takes a long time to grow and change our minds about ourselves. So that's the thing that I was like, wow, she really thinks this about herself. And it, you know, as a reader, you are like probably a little frustrated, like, come on, but you know, it's hard to change. It's hard to change.
Oh my gosh.
Especially how you feel about yourself.
And especially after, you know, probably a decade for her of feeling that way about herself and being, you know, thinking that every single day. Those are hard habits to break.
Yeah, they are. But it makes it that more satisfying, like, now that I'm at the end, you know, and I don't see her as, like, this broken person anymore. I see what she becomes. I'm like, oh, you got this. But, you know, learning to trust yourself and grow and going out in the world and meeting new people and having experiences, all of that lends to you finding out what you're made of and finding out what you're capable of. You go on these journeys, and she definitely has a big adventure in just a very different way that Collie did.
That's
Same
awesome.
kind of, you know, themes of growing and fate and stuff, but completely different.
That's great. I just think that'll be, you know, awesome to read, and something that I think I'm excited for youth and, you know, girls like her to be able to read and feel like they're not so alone, because I think that's something a lot of teenagers and boys and girls alike all struggle with, because, you know, the world is all about them. But we all were like that when we were teenagers. I know I was.
Oh,
it was all about
I know.
me.
I was so awful.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure I had my redeeming qualities, but for the most part, I was 17 is not a great year.
Oh, 17 was probably my worst year as a child.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
a good one. Well, so I have a question for you. I want to see, you know, since we've talked last, and last time I know we talked more about the query process and finding an agent and all of that, but now that you're at the end of not one book series but two, what tips or, you know, little nuggets of wisdom do you want to share with aspiring authors, or even, you know, authors who have been published but are now, you know, working on the next big project?
I would, and this sounds so trite, but I really believe it. You just have got to keep writing. You have to keep writing and reading. Those are the two things, you know, that consuming the story and then creating the story. It's a full cycle, and you can't do one without the other. You really have to be doing both. And, you know, for me, I've faced my own restrictions. So with this story, I had just finished The 100th Queen, and my agent submitted the Evermore Chronicles to, well, the first book was the standalone, is what I wrote, to my editor. And then they flew me out to Amazon, and I met him face-to-face. And the first day I met him, just like hours after I met him, he rejected my book to my face.
Oh my gosh.
Because, like this book, the one that's being published, he rejected it because they had published a book called Ticker, which was about a girl with a clock heart not that long ago. And so they didn't want to publish another title that was too similar. And he also wanted me to follow up a series with another series. And I had written a standalone. So I'm like meeting him for the first time and pretending not to be completely devastated. I'd never been rejected to my face by an editor, especially my editor. So I'm like trying to keep it together, and I go back to my room and I write my agent, and I'm kind of upset. Like, I feel like I've been set up. So
Yeah.
I'm like, how come? Did he tell you this? Did we know that this was happening? Because he hadn't said a word about it.
Right.
Well, I slept on it, and we were doing an interview together, like in front of a whole group of people the next morning. And I love my editor. He wasn't trying to hurt my feelings. He was just being very honest. It was a very business-oriented type decision.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I just need to just let this go. It's fine. So I emailed my agent again. I'm like, I'm over it. I'm good. I will write something else. It's not a big deal. We went and, you know, he and I had a good rest of our day, and it was fine. So I came up with other book ideas in, like, the next, I don't know, 2-3 months. And I get an email out of my agent, just out of the blue, like 2 months later, and she says, so Jason's ready to pitch some of your ideas. Which one do you want to pitch? And she listed my Clock Heart book. And I was like, what do you mean? You rejected that. She goes, no. If you really want it, you can do that. And I was like, what? You're going to do it? And she's like, yeah, but you have to turn it into a series. So I went right back to the drawing board, and I came up with 2 other synopses, and I started all over and gutted my book and changed everything and created this mythology, because that's publishing.
Right.
Like, you just don't give up. And I didn't know she was hounding him about that idea. She had done that behind my back. God bless her.
Yeah, good
and
for her.
He knew that that's what I wanted to write, and he's like, okay, if this is what you write, if you want to write, if this is where your heart is, this is what you can publish. Now, I understand how unique that situation is. My agent not every agent's going to hound the editor. Not every editor is going to say, write the book of your heart.
Yeah.
But publishing is like that. You have got to know what you want and just be undeviating and write it and create it and just keep at it. You're the only one, really, really, at the end of the day, that is championing you. Like, your work is everything. Who your publisher is, how much marketing money, whatever, it doesn't matter. The only thing you control is what is on that page. And if your heart is in it, that will get you where you want to go. It just will.
I love that. That is such great advice. And I love hearing about the publishing side and how it works, you know, that dynamic and all of that, because I think that's something aspiring authors and people who are wanting and trying to get their books published need to hear the reality of how it's actually going to be, and you know, sometimes the toughness of it. So I think that's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's no point where you've just really arrived and they're going to do what you want them to do. Like,
Right.
You're going to find out that they published a book like yours not long ago. And that's just the truth. There's no, it's still a business, but, you know, we can't control that part of it. All we can control is, like, what we put our heart into.
Right.
And if our heart, you know, it is, if your heart is there, like, they will feel that, they will sense that, and it will happen.
Yeah. It makes a big difference when you're writing something that you truly care about as opposed to just writing what you think is popular or, you know, what you
Right.
think will sell. It. The voice and the emotion behind it probably will come off a little differently.
Yeah, it totally will.
Well, I think that is so awesome. So you already answered my question about Amazon publishing, which was perfect, and in all your other answers. Have you, The 100th Queen was published through Amazon Publishing as well? That's awesome. So this part I guess we don't really need to have in there, but just for my personal knowledge, have you enjoyed that working with them as your publisher?
Oh, totally. I love APUB. They have, so I've done 7 books with my editor now, and I've submitted a duology to him that he wants. I'm just waiting to see how that goes in acquisition. So that would be 9 books with them.
Wow.
And I really just love them. They really care about an author's experience. They've given me a lot of say in what my book looks like, covers. So, like,
That's
the second
awesome.
cover of the Evermore Chronicles, the Into the Hourglass, I told them, I said, put a ship in the hourglass. So that was my idea. And they listened to me because they're amazing. And they're
That's
like, cool. And
great.
it turned out fantastic. And so a lot of people don't really have that kind of thing. I picked my titles for all of the Evermore Chronicles.
Wow.
That was me. I came up with all 3, and they approved them. I mean, they still have to approve them, but
Yeah.
I have such creative control, and I really like that because I feel like I'm steering my career. But if they think I'm going to steer off a cliff, they'll say no. Like, for instance, I wanted the Warrior Queen cover to be green. I thought that would have been really great, like a gorgeous emerald. And then they came back and said, no, green covers don't sell. And when Amazon says that, and they have all of the data,
They
you
know.
listen. So
Yeah.
I said, okay, give
Yeah.
me a different cover. So I like that side of it. They really know what they're doing. I like the speed at which they publish. It suits me because I write that fast. If I had to wait a year or a year and a half
Oof.
between books, I would wither and die. Like,
I mean,
I have to be creating.
Your series would take so long to be finished too, if you know,
Oh,
if you had to wait a
forever.
year,
Like-
year and a half in between.
Oh my gosh, I just couldn't do it. So in that way, it just really fits for me. It does. It's not for everybody, but it really fits for me. So I love them, and like, you have to be. They are like a traditional publisher. So you have to be agented,
Right.
and your agent has to submit to them, and so it's a very comparable experience to the Big 5,
Wow.
which I really like because it's like a little bit of a gatekeeper thing, and I like that as well.
Well, and Amazon is just such a powerhouse and so many other things. I
Yeah.
feel like this publishing and all the books that they have on there, they could, you know, and obviously do a really awesome job. So that's cool to hear. I really didn't even know that they did that. So that's cool.
Yeah, they're really awesome. They are Goliath, and I think there's upsides and downsides to every single publisher.
For
They
sure.
are. There just are. I talk to people who are published from Rice Scholastic and Harper and all this, and they're like, oh, they don't do this, or oh, they only do this, and everyone has opinions about different things. But I think it just comes down to finding the right publishing path for you. You know, everyone looks different than the next person. If you know, someone puts out a book every 5 years, Amazon's probably not the best fit. But
No.
if they write commercial novels and put them out very quickly, then it is. So it just really depends. There's no right or wrong way. It's however you perceive your career, like how you conceive of it, how you want it to be.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have control over that. We can tell an agent, I don't use this up to them, or I want to be with so-and-so, and to some extent, but they still have to kind of choose you, which is You know, that's the kismet part. To see where
Right.
you land and see where you're meant to be. I don't know. It's just part of the game of publishing. But I have been thrilled to be with APOB, and I will publish with them as long as they'll have me. I wouldn't mind branching over into Big Five, but I will always have a foot in Amazon. Like, I would do Big Five on top of Amazon, because I don't, like I said, I don't want to slow down my career, and I would be slowing it down then.
Oh, yeah, you would, because the Big Five move a little slower.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that is so exciting. I'm so excited for the Evermore Chronicles, the first one to come out. I just can't wait, and the covers are beautiful. The pictures that you've posted are just incredible. So pretty.
Oh, thank you.
So my last question for you is my last question for everybody, but what is your favorite book or books right now? Besides your own, of course.
That's a really interesting question. I am reading a ton of nonfiction right now.
Ooh.
And I know that's like super weird, but I have started reading a collection of short stories about the Fae, about fairies.
Nice.
And the same person put together a collection of short stories about witches and witchcraft. And I mean, it's fiction, it is, but it feels like nonfiction because these people actually like genuinely believe these things happen, which is really hilarious. I love it so much. It makes it that much creepier, you know?
Yes.
Like, what if this was real?
Right.
You know, but it's, they're edited by Marvin Kaye, Kaye, and I just love them. They're just full of kind of old tales. They have a mix of more contemporary type stories, you know, dealing with the Fae and stuff like that. But it's like anthologies, and I am totally into them. I have just been gobbling them up, and it's been nice to do kind of a little bit of like a research thing, because I'm always, like I said, doing stories, but also just read these like really out there stories about what people believe that like the Fae can do, or witches and warlocks can do. It's super amusing. So that's what I have been reading. I have been totally into that kind of stuff, and then of course I've been reading up on Vikings and that too. That was a lot of the reason I went to Iceland, is I wanted to do a ton of research on Vikings.
That's awesome.
So a lot of the books I've been reading are on that. I picked up a book about like sorcerer spells that they actually like use, their sorcerers use, and they're very lyrical, like reading poetry.
Wow.
They're incredible. They're kind of creepy, like I said. Some of them are a little out there, but really interesting and beautifully written.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. That's a different kind of favorite book, but I love. I used to, when I was in high school, I was very fascinated by witches and witchcraft, and I remember reading some historical books, about the Salem witch trials, but also even farther back, like in England and all that with witches and whatnot. But I think that stuff is so cool. It's crazy to think, like you said, about the people who really believe in things like that, like fairies and leprechauns and whatnot, but it's mind-opening for sure, which is never a bad thing.
No, it's never a bad thing. It's fun to see someone else's interpretation of things too.
Yeah.
I think sometimes in genres we can get kind of locked into certain perceptions of things, and I really enjoyed reading all these different sci-fi fantasy authors' visions of what the Fae are, and what witches are, and what warlocks are, and what they look like to them, because it's different. It's not the same in everyone's mind, and it's fun to read a different, like a variety of how they've been depicted in fiction and what they're like. It gives you, I don't know, like a fuller picture of their behavior, and also makes it kind of helps you figure out what you like and you don't like about those things. So it's kind of fun. I've enjoyed it a lot.
I love that. That's so exciting. Well,
yeah, I'm sorry. That's like literally what I'm reading right now.
No.
I'm like, what else am I reading? I'm like, that's what I'm reading.
I think that's
They're
great.
Books. They're like 400 pages, and I'm like,
what?
Oh, one's almost 500 pages. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I was expecting it to be like a short little book, not like ginormous.
I know. They're beautiful books, and they're really, really fun, but they're dense. They are dense, full of lots of stories and little quirks, and I've taken pens and I'm underlining things. I'm totally into it.
I love it. I think it's great to to read different things. I try and do that and branch out and pick up things I wouldn't normally do, because that's all part of it.
Right.
Well, I'll go ahead and do a little sign off, and then I'll tell you when this podcast will air. So then we'll do our sign off, and then we'll keep talking. Well, Emily, thank you so much for chatting with us for a second time. I'm so excited for your new series to come out and to continue to see all the wonderful stories that you share with us.
Thank you for having me, Rose. It was always fun to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Rose Quinn podcast. Every single time you listen, it just makes me so happy, and all the time I spend putting these episodes together is really worth it. Make sure to rate and review this podcast wherever you listen. I know it might seem like something really small, but it really helps me out. And make sure to connect with me on Instagram and Twitter at Rose Quinny, Quinny. See you next time. Time.